let's play around a little bit with the shape tools. Now, the shape tools are the most basic form of creating objects in Illustrator. Now, you need to think in Illustrator in terms of building something with shapes. So you take a circle and add it with a square and add it with a triangle, to create a final object of what you want it to look like. So you need to think in simplistic ways. So some of the tools here, you look at them, you're like, well, geez, I'd probably never use that. You will. And that's because Illustrator builds from simple shapes to create something a little bit more complex. And you need to think that way, or Illustrator will be really tricky to create things. So let's take a look at our first one over here. If we come over here on the side, I'm going to start with the line segment tool. I'm going to come over here and I have a nice blue stroke selected. I'm going to increase the size of my stroke a little bit so that you can see it a little bit better. And I'm going to click and drag, and as you can see, Illustrator is drawing a line for me. If I hold the Shift key down, it will draw in a straight line or in 45-degree angles, as you can see. And as soon as I release my click, it's drawn a line for me. So that's how we use the line segment tool. Now let's take a look at another quick key function that we've talked about previously. Let's hold the Alt key down and let's pull out, and as you can see, it goes from the point where we first clicked and it pulls from each side. That's the Option key. If I hold the Shift key down, it'll pull from both ends in a straight line. So that's very helpful. Let's take a look at the next tool. So let's go ahead and delete this. Let's click and hold on top of the line segment tool. It brings up new options. And we're going to try the arc tool. Now, I've never really used this, but it's a tool that I could see some application, and I may use it down the road, so I thought I would show it to you. Same thing, if we click and drag, it begins to draw an arc for us. If I hold the Shift key down, it will begin to do it proportionally. If I hold the Alt key down, it pulls from both ends to create the shape. When I release, I now have an arc. So play around with that one. It's one I don't use an awful lot, but it does create a nice arc feature if you need that. Let's go ahead and delete that. Now let's go just below where the line segment tool and the arc tool were. I'm not going to mess with any of these other ones in here. You can play with those if you want. Never used them, but they're there if you feel like you have a need for them, so play with them if you want. I'm going to go ahead and go into the next option here below. We're going to start with the rectangle tool. So go ahead and select your rectangle tool. I'm going to go ahead and change my stroke to a fill. So I'm going to hit this arced arrow key. There we go. It's now switched over to a fill. And I'm going to click and drag. And as you can see, Illustrator is now creating a square for me, or a rectangle, or a line, or a bar. Depending on how I drag, it will create the shape for me. Now if I hold Shift down, it will maintain proportions for me and will create a perfect square. If I hold the Option key down at the same time, it pulls from the center of my click to create the square. As you can see, there's our square. And I'm going to delete that. Let's go to the next tool. Let's click and hold on the rectangle tool, and we have the rounded rectangle tool. This is a cool one. I use this quite frequently. Let's go ahead and let's click and drag. And again, if we hold the Shift key down, it will maintain proportions. Hold the Option key down, and it will pull from all four edges. And if I come here, you can see it has now created a rounded rectangle edge. Now let's say that I wanted to change how curved my rectangle is. Now this technique, or how to get to the options of each of these tools, is the same way. I don't get into many of the others that often, but I do get into them on this one. To do that, select the rectangle or the rounded rectangle tool, come over to your canvas and just click once, and it'll pull up your options. Here you have the option to set a specific width and height. Also, you can change the corner radius. This is how curved you want the edges to be. So if you want them to be more or less curved, you can change them here in this setting. I'll go ahead and show you. I'll increase them a little bit. And as you can see, those are extremely curved now. So play around with those. And like I said, on any of these shape tools, you can access their options menu. Let me just show you, for example, on the rectangle tool, if I click and release, it'll pull up this dialog box. I don't use it on very many of them other than the rounded rectangle tool, and that's only because on the rounded rectangle tool I really do need to alter on some images how curved I want those edges to be. Okay, let's go to the next one down. Let's click and hold. Let's go to the ellipse tool. Let's click and drag. As you can see, we're creating an oval. If I hold shift down, it'll create a perfect circle. If I hold the option key down, it will pull it from all four edges. There we go. So that's the ellipse tool. Very helpful. Now let's go to the polygon tool. Don't use this one an awful lot again, but it does come in handy if you ever did need to create something like this. Now let's say here I have 6 sides, but let's say I was doing an octagon. How do I get an octagon? This is easily done by, while you're holding and clicking and dragging, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard to add or remove sides. As you can see, I'm adding and removing sides. If I release, now we have what we most commonly know as a stop sign. So that is a very nice feature that it has to create some of these objects that would maybe be a little bit more tricky to create by hand or with the pen tool, or trying to create it with a bunch of squares and adding them together. That just doesn't make sense. So this does come in handy at times. Again, we hold shift down to do things proportionally. We hold the option key down to drag from all four corners. Let's delete that. Let's go to the next one. We have the star tool. Same thing with the star tool. As we're clicking and dragging, if we use our up and down arrow keys, we can add and remove points. So very, very helpful. Now if I click once with the star tool, it will give you options of how long you want the stars to go out. Let me show you a little bit of this. You have 2 radiuses. You have the outside and the inside one. Here you can set how many points you want. Here you can see I currently have 5. Let me just change the radius to and show you what happens. I'm going to pull it down a little bit. I'm going to hit OK. As you can see, it pulled that inside one in quite a bit. Now let's try it the other way. Let's pull this one back up to 0.25, and now let's pull radius 1 down and show you what it does. It made the points a little bit stubbier. So you have that option there too with the star tool. So the star tool and the rounded rectangle tool are the most commonly the tools that I will access the tools dialog box by just clicking on the canvas once. Again, you have the option to hold shift down to pull things proportionally, hold the option key down to pull from all 4 edges. So play around with the shape tools. Illustrator is a shape program. You need to think in terms of shapes, so you will be using these very, very frequently. So play around with them, get comfortable with them, and enjoy the capabilities that they offer.